I've spent the last 2 years aggressively burning in my 4K QD-OLED monitor, and it's time to take a look at how it's holding up. If you're new to this series, I've been burning in my MSI MPG 321URX monitor on purpose by using it exclusively for productivity work. I'm talking stag desktop content all day, writing scripts, browsing the web, updating spreadsheets, and more. The complete opposite of how I normally recommend people use an OLED, which is for content consumption like gaming or video playback. This all stems from my decision 2 years ago to switch out the 32-inch 4K IPS LCD I was using with my workstation for a brand new 32-inch 4K QD-OLED. I changed nothing else about my setup to test what it would be like to use an OLED in the same way as an LCD. So no dark mode, no minimizing the taskbar, no screensaver after just a few minutes. This is a really intense use case for an OLED, but it's a real-world, realistic test at the same time because it's exactly how I've been using my workstation for years. At this point, I've been using this OLED for approximately 6,500 hours, which is 8 to 10 hours of static use at 200 nits of brightness every single day. The panel is reporting that 659 compensation cycles have been run, which is a normal pace that has been kept up throughout this testing. Again, the recommended rate for compensation cycles is every 4 hours, but doing this is a bit disruptive during work as the cycle makes the monitor unusable for 7 minutes. If the display was being put to sleep regularly and the recommended rate was followed, I'd expect to see more like 1,500 compensation cycles at this point. In this update, I'm showing the 6, 12, 18, and 24-month results. Again, we're focusing on the center of the display, which is where in previous months there was visible burn-in. I've kept using the same system from the last few updates to make these burn-in results viewable through YouTube compression, including adding some static noise to the image, which seems to reduce compression artifacts and makes the burn-in more visible. I'd still recommend watching this video at 4K for the highest image quality, but before we get into it,
Today's sponsor spot is brought to you by MSI and their GeForce RTX 50 series graphics cards, including flagship models like the Supreme Liquid and Vanguard, both of which delivered class-leading results in our testing. Powered by NVIDIA's Blackwell architecture, RTX 50 series GPUs are the ultimate way to experience ray tracing, delivering more realistic lighting and visual fidelity than ever. You'll also benefit from AI-powered DLSS 4 frame generation and NVIDIA Reflex for smoother, more responsive gameplay. Across MSI's lineup, you'll find robust power delivery engineered for maximum stability under extreme workloads, improved overclocking headroom, and long-term reliability. Their claw-textured 7-blade fans enhance airflow while minimizing turbulence and noise for efficient, quiet cooling. For more information on MSI's GeForce RTX 50 series graphics cards, please check the link in the video description.
first up are the original unenhanced examples as seen directly from the camera. These examples roughly reflect what burn-in looks like in real life, though in some situations the real-life visibility of these artifacts is worse than you'll see here. Initially, after just a few months of testing, burn-in was quite hard to spot in the unenhanced examples, but over time it's become more noticeable, especially when viewing dark to mid-dark uniform grey content. The examples here have been captured at 6-month intervals and show a progressive decline in screen uniformity and an increase in burn-in. The most noticeable artifact is the line down the center of the screen, which corresponds to the border of applications when used in a side-by-side view. This line is inverse burn-in. The brighter application windows have degraded other areas of the screen faster than the dark line that separates the apps running down the center. After 24 months, the line is certainly visible, but I wouldn't say burn-in is accelerating. The results are still pretty similar to what we saw after 18 months. If you look at 24 months versus 12 months though, there's a noticeable difference in my opinion, especially with certain dark grey patterns, which makes the line more obvious in everyday applications. As the left and right halves of the screen become darker and more burned in over time, the central line area separates itself from the rest of the screen in a more prominent way. So at 24 months, we're seeing this combination of a more visible line and a generally darker appearance across the rest of the panel. The other major artifact is the taskbar, which has also been inverse burned in. I use a dark taskbar with light mode applications, so the brighter application windows have degraded that area of the screen faster than the taskbar. I think this is the area where I've seen a more visible decline comparing each 6-month interval. After 6 months, taskbar burn-in was basically a non-issue. It was slightly visible at 12 months, a bit more visible at 18 months, and now even more visible at 24 months. And I think there is a noticeable difference between 18 and 24 months. When we enable the burn-in enhancement filter, these artifacts become more obvious. To be clear though, these are digitally enhanced images of the screen that deliberately exaggerate the small differences in uniformity the camera is capturing. This is not how the panel looks in real life, but it's designed to make the observations easier. With this filter enabled, I actually think the line down the center of the screen is slightly less noticeable after 24 months than after 18 months, but this is purely because the left and right halves have darkened and degraded more. With the 18-month examples, there's a pretty noticeable difference in uniformity between the left and right halves, which makes the line more prominent. With the 24-month examples, the level of degradation in the left and right has become more even, though you can clearly see the overall level of burn-in after 24 months is more significant than after 12 months. The taskbar, on the other hand, I think we're just seeing a linear increase in the visibility of the inverse burned-in taskbar element. This area of the screen is degrading much slower than the rest, which is keeping its relative luminance higher in these dark grey test patterns. With the enhancement filter enabled, taskbar burn-in is very obvious, though it's less distracting in real life. After 24 months, I also noticed for the first time that some app icons have started to burn into the taskbar area, showing as distinct shadows within the brighter taskbar element. Here I've zoomed in and focused on just the taskbar area where I have apps pinned. Without the enhancement filter, you can just make out some shadows here corresponding to icons, and I'd say this is a little more visible in real life than what is seen here. When using the enhancement filter, this burn-in is much more obvious and confirms what I was seeing faintly in real life. App icons are now starting to burn in. You can't tell what the icons are specifically, but this is the most distinct classical burn-in that I've seen throughout this testing so far. The line and taskbar artifacts are inverse burn-in applying to large general areas. This is burn-in from distinct, smaller elements that are almost always on screen in the same position. It was bound to happen at some point, and indeed, here it is. I also spotted similar burn-in in the bottom right corner. This is where Windows places the time, date, and status icons. With the dark taskbar, this text is light, it's always in the same position, and we're seeing that shadowy burn-in artifact here. It's less distinct than the app icons though, probably because each element in this area features thinner, smaller lines. We can use color examples to explore how the display's individual subpixels are degrading. As I found in previous months, the red subpixel has degraded the least, as I only started to spot faint burn-in around the, say, 12 to 18 month marks. We have the blue subpixel, that's the second most affected, with more obvious burn-in dating back to the 6th month mark. And then we get to the green subpixel, which is clearly the worst of the three. It's degrading the fastest and seems to be contributing the most to overall burn-in results. None of these results have changed substantially between 18 months and 24 months. Again, it's all just a gradual continuation of what I observed previously. Uneven aging of the subpixels can cause a color temperature shift over time, and that's what I noticed occurred around the 12-month mark, where the display's white point had shifted from 6450K to about 6350K. However, when I retested at the 24-month mark, I noticed the color temperature had slightly shifted back up to around 6390K. It's too early to say whether this is a distinct trend of the compensation cycles helping to prevent uneven subpixel wear, or whether it's just a one-off from this month's testing. As things stand, the color temperature is broadly similar to when I first got the monitor, and I don't think this is a massive concern with burn-in so far. There is also a theory that the burn-in compensation cycles will reduce peak brightness over time as they attempt to compensate for uneven wear and cause the entire panel to run at a lower brightness level. For the first 18 months, I spotted precisely 0 brightness change. It started at 243 in its peak and remained at 243 in its peak after all that time. After 21 months, for the first time ever, I've recorded a small brightness drop to 238 nits, and I retested this month and got 238 nits as well. So no further degradation in brightness, but what was observed last time is still the case today. Here's an accelerated time-lapse of the burn-in so far. Nothing too different from last time that we showed this time-lapse, but the usual view of the gradual degradation and burn-in over 2 years of use. A lot of the artifacts were first spotted as early as 3 or 6 months in, and then more recently we're seeing artifacts like taskbar icon burn-in. So how has burn-in affected my usage of this monitor so far? Well, there's no substantial changes at 24 months compared to the last update at 21 months, but for a little while now I've been complaining about how some of these artifacts are visible in real-world use cases. I do notice the line down the center in some productivity apps that use dark gray backgrounds, like Adobe Photoshop and Premiere. That's pretty annoying. I wouldn't say it has a huge impact or makes my job impossible, but it's a constant reminder that my OLED panel has indeed burned in. Occasionally, when creating videos, I've seen this line artifact in video footage and thought it was an issue with the footage itself instead of a hardware burn-in problem with the monitor, but that's still pretty rare at this point. The taskbar burn-in and the visibility of some of the app icon burn-in has had little to no impact so far because I pretty much always use the monitor with the taskbar visible, and this hides the burn-in because the burned-in static elements are on screen. I'm sure at some point this will be a bigger issue in full screen content. So far, I'm not super concerned about it. It would be a much larger problem if I was using this display in more of a 50-50 split between productivity and full screen content consumption where that taskbar might be visible. Because I vary the apps I'm using on the screen, I'm yet to see any specific app taskbars or elements like that burn in, such as, for example, the Google Chrome navigation bar. Right now, even after 2 years, burn-in is still isolated to Windows operating system elements. If you're wondering how these burn-in results might relate to your usage of an OLED or to a potential OLED purchase, I think there's a couple of key takeaways. Firstly, with around 6,500 hours of use over 2 years, I'm talking about more than 8 hours a day of pure static productivity work at 200 nits of brightness every single day, including weekends. If you use this display for work during standard 8-hour workdays 5 days a week, this would be more representative of 3 years of use. And if you use the screen for work only part-time, that lifespan extends, and the 24-month results in this video will be more representative of possibly 4 or more years. This is all because burn-in is cumulative and directly related to the number of hours viewing the same static content. If you only use static apps 4 hours a day, you should expect to see double the lifespan compared to using static apps 8 hours a day. If you're someone that mostly uses an OLED for gaming, plus maybe a couple of hours of desktop apps a day, I don't think you should be worried about burn-in. It's unlikely to be a significant issue with that use case. The second takeaway is that I've done nothing to prevent burn-in. This is a really intensive test, and there's evidence that the specific way I'm using the screen is contributing to burn-in. I use light mode, which seems to be degrading the main part of the screen where I use apps noticeably faster than any of the darker sections. And the contrast between light mode apps and a dark taskbar is causing uneven wear and more visible taskbar burn-in. Having some parts of the screen being consistently bright with some parts consistently dark is a real nightmare for OLEDs and a worst case scenario. I think I'd be seeing less visible burn-in if I was using a configuration that would wear the screen more evenly. This could be light mode with a light taskbar, or even better, dark mode with a dark taskbar. Running each OLED pixel at a lower luminance level is a great way to preserve the lifespan, so I'd strongly recommend dark mode, and it's something many people prefer to use anyway. Combine that with having most of the screen at a similar, even brightness level, and the wear should be more even. I'd also recommend using a screensaver that turns off the display after a few minutes of inactivity, or using the built-in screensaver or proximity sensor feature that's available on some monitors. My screen is set to go to sleep after 2 hours of inactivity, which is not recommended for an OLED, and if you can minimize the amount of time the screen is on but you're not actually using it, again, the lifespan will increase. Lastly, even in this worst case scenario, burn-in isn't too bad after 2 years. I still think this panel will be usable after another year of this intense stress test, which bodes really well for more normal use cases. Yes, ideally I'd like to see it last at least 5 years, but it's held up better than I expected after the first 2 years. Newer monitors released since the MSI 321 URX that use new panels are also supposed to have more efficient panel technology with more burn-in prevention features, so the panel manufacturers are continuing to enhance OLED technology since this test started. I just don't think OLED burn-in should be a major concern for most buyers today, unless you are a very heavy productivity user. Anyway, I'll be back in a few months from now for more updates and more burn-in testing. For now, that's it for this one. If you do want to support Monitors Unboxed and all the independent testing that we do here on the channel, then please consider signing up to our Patreon. Links to that is in the description. If you sign up, you get access to some pretty cool benefits. We've got our monthly live streams. We've got our Discord community, great place to ask questions about monitors and that sort of thing. We've got calibrated settings for all the displays we test and so on. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.